Hello, everyone, and welcome to Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. My name is Brent Frain. I'm the host. Today, I have MP Mike Morrice from Kitchener Centre, Ontario, joining me. And Mike is going to be talking about DERB, about his e-petition that he has going through the House of Commons. We need to get those signatures up as high as we can. And Mike's going to be talking all about what's going on with the progress on that and everything what's going on with DERB, because DERB is the word.
Thanks, thanks, Brent. Good to be back with you again. For those watching live, apologies for some of the technical difficulties, but kudos to you, Neil and Brent, for navigating us through it.
That hasn't happened since the very first episode, so
happens eventually to everyone. So this was just the day for that. But yeah, for those of you watching live, apologies. We're going to get right to questions. So I'll be really brief, just to say that poverty doesn't take a break over the summertime. People in my community and across the country with disabilities continue to live in poverty. We're hearing at least 18 months from the federal government. That's the timeline that they have kind of set for themselves. They could choose more quickly. They've chosen not to. Well, we can then choose to continue to advocate also. And so the petition that you referenced, Brent, came directly from the disability community. Petitions are one way that we can continue to advocate using a parliamentary tool, even when Parliament isn't sitting. In fact, the petition will close before Parliament sits, which will allow me to present it as soon as we are back. And it's the work of many. In this case, it's Jeffrey Salisbury in particular, who is the kind of initiator of the petition. He's been doing some great media with it, but is one of so many people with disabilities across the country who have continued to put out this call and have really put it into a pretty clear petition that we can now all share to continue to demonstrate the number of people across the country who are saying enough is enough, and let's just move on and get something done in the short term, while we also push to budget for the disability benefit and to get that done too. But it doesn't need to be an either or. You can do both. And really proud to be sponsoring this petition, one of two. And I know we've probably shared in the chat already, and if not, I'm sure we will. But there's a second petition on the same topic from MP Zarillo. All the more ways for us to continue to get voices heard on this really important call.
I should say, before we launched, I had everything in the description. I'm going to be adding it again later because we had so many foibles at the beginning of the broadcast. But I did want to say that your petition, Mike, it closes on September 10. Is that correct?
Yes, I'll just double check. That's the date I've got in my head. September 10th at 8:40 in the morning.
Yeah, because and the reason I know that is because that's my son's birthday. So
there we are.
I saw your date and I'm going, oh, my son's birthday.
Wouldn't that be a nice, good birthday present?
There you go.
To have
Absolutely.
So we recognize it. We want to get this out to people immediately, and how important DERB is. I know that people need help back now. They needed help yesterday, and and like 18 months from now or 2 years from now, my gosh, I don't know how much more we can stress the point how important it is to get the financial relief out there. I mean, the urgency that the federal government took to get CERB out. I mean, it took what, 1 day? They passed legislation and boom, they got it out there. And I mean, we've been waiting for way too long, and people are suffering immensely, and they don't need to be suffering in this country at all. And having DERB out there for a substantial amount to get people by on top of their existing provincial programs as a top up would definitely help people in so many ways.
To me, the pandemic has actually been a little bit of a saving grace, because it's really kind of opened a lot of eyes, I think.
It has.
Because, for the longest time, the provincial governments have said, $1,000 is enough for people living on disability, right? And then what does Justin Trudeau do? He says the absolute minimum that people need to survive on is a $2,000 CERB. So right away, he set the bar to 2,000. Well, knowing that the bulk of people with disabilities live on half of that, and I know that the inflation rate is like 15% higher than it was in 2020. So that $2,000 is, if you account for inflation, it would be closer to $2,300 now.
And the power agency roads away. So
like here in BC, for example, we only just got an increase in that. That's good. But so our increase was 150. So we're up to
125.
We're up to 125. So we're up to $1,500 now. So before we were like, basically at 1,300, or a little over 1,300, and $1,300 isn't even enough to rent anything.
Yeah.
If you're trying to rent.
With that 125 though, Neil, is the buying power. I mean, you can't really get much for that 125. It's like once upon a time where, I'm sure, Mike, you can maybe talk about this, that, you see, say like a $50 bill. Wow. How much money what you could get for that much money. Now it's like, it doesn't even seem like you can get very much. I know, like, there was a lady at the grocery store just the other day, and her bill came to like $72 and hardly any items. It's like the produce and all your basic essentials. It just blossomed up. These corporations are making record profits. Meanwhile, the consumer is just paying through the nose. And so, like, the 125 that we got increase, it doesn't go too far.
And Brent and I are older than you, Mike. So, like, I remember buying chocolate bars for 25 cents each.
Yeah, me too.
And my parents would give me a dollar, and there was no tax. So my parents would give me $1, and I'd come back from the store with 4 chocolate bars, and they were big too. They weren't all like shrinkflation, or they shrink the size of the chocolate bar. They were like big chocolate bars too.
Yeah, they were.
So yeah.
You used to be able to buy a chocolate bar, a bag of chips, a small tiny bag of chips. I think they're like 35 grams or wherever they are. I don't know, 70 grams, I think they are, yeah. And a small bottle pop in a glass bottle, not plastic, glass bottle. Or a can, if you would, whichever, same thing. And came to $1.05 with the 5-cent deposit. So I remember riding my bike, doing the paper route, and they'd say, "Well, bring back that bottle back to me, Brent, and we'll just give me $1 bill." That's right, we had dollar bills back then, not the the loonie that we have now. Yeah.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we were successful in that amendment. So for myself in Ontario, for people living on the Ontario Disability Support Program, or ODSP, one of the reasons why it's so disgustingly low is it's not indexed to inflation every year. So people with disabilities in Ontario, it might be the same case in BC, I'm not as familiar, but they actually fall further and further behind every year. And then we have got a government that, in a year when inflation was 7% at one point or so, they raised ODSP by 5%, and they expected a bunch of pats on the back. Well, even when they're increasing it, people with disabilities are still actually falling further behind. So I'm glad that at least when it comes to the disability benefit, while most decisions will be in the regulations, one of the 5 amendments my team and I were able to get through will require it to be indexed to inflation. Yep. So it will keep up once it's in place, but that does nothing for people in my community today who are living on ODSP and living in legislated poverty. And this is why these calls for the disability emergency response benefit are so important. Now, I know we've been getting a bunch of questions. Do you want to start jumping into those?
Sure.
And I saw a bunch on social media leading up to this. A number of folks were asking kind of, yeah, but I'll leave it to you both if there's questions coming in the chat.
Yeah, there's
but
one from Linda, and she says, my family doesn't qualify for the 125. So I'm assuming she lives in BC here. Doesn't qualify for the 125 increase because we're in low income housing.
Right.
And she says we could be using that money for food if they just applied it to the the base amount, but of course they're applying it to the shelter amount, so they can't use that money, right?
Right. Did you want to comment on that, Mike? Or,
well, I think it's one of the important aspects of this call for DERB is that there's not conditions attached to it. That what are you doing, making it all the more difficult between a clawback here or a constraint there about where someone could use dollars that are still below the poverty line.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
And to comment on Linda on your comment on that, and I'm going to summarize it very quickly on that. The 125, the reason, and actually there shouldn't even been a reason why you didn't get that 125, right? I mean, it was kind of, again, divided between the disability community. You can have it or you can't have it. And we need to, the government needs to stop that, right? I mean, it's like 125, just give it to people and they can better their lives. They can put it to whatever they need to, more groceries, buy more disability equipment, whatever, or vitamins, minerals, whatever you need, where food banks don't always give you all those things. And I think it was a misstep that the government could have easily done, where, yeah, you're going to benefit people in RGI. I mean, you benefit an extra 125, great, right? I mean, well, you're not supposed to benefit from it because you're in RGI. I mean, people in market housing got the 125, but because of the cost of living, yeah, like you really don't really feel too much of it. But 125 is better than no dollars. That's my view.
Well, when they did the CERB, it was all just one lump sum, and when you have two sums and say, well, this is shelter and this is support, then it's kind of very paternal, because you're basically saying, people with disabilities aren't smart enough to manage their own money. That's almost, it's like, it's very derivative to say, like, you guys can't handle looking after yourselves, so we have to divide up the money and tell you which portion is for food and which portion is for shelter. I mean, dividing it up, we can figure it out. In fact, we're probably more fiscally responsible with our money because we have so much less of it, right? So
I know there was a comment that came in from Tyler just the other day. I was just wondering if you could maybe mention that to Mike.
What's that?
That comment that came in from Tyler, that was a message for Mike.
Oh, he basically said something about the new minister shooting down the idea of DERB even before it's off the ground or even before you finished your petition.
I thought it was a really important question from Tyler, because it gets into expectations and into the importance of advocacy. If the federal government were already supportive of a disability emergency response benefit, we wouldn't need the petition. We know where they currently stand. In fact, both MPs Zerillo and myself in the House and at committee over the past year have brought forward motions to move forward on it. I was at committee when MP Zerillo did just that many months ago. And she didn't receive any support from fellow committee members from any other party.
Yeah. And I should say, sorry, Mike, I should say that I did try to get you both on. I really, really did try to get you both on at the same time. I thought it would be great to have, that nonpartisan, joining together forces. But unfortunately her schedule just didn't work out. So hopefully she'll come on sometime in September, but I did try.
Yeah. 2 petitions for DERB.
Yeah.
And for my part, I just want to be reporting back with some accountability to the disability community on various people in the House of Commons who have been advocating, and MP Zarrillo is certainly one of them. She's done I think a fantastic job. And as it relates to this question about DERB specifically, again, she's been bringing it up, and so we know that they haven't been supportive up until this point, and that's partly why this petition is important. Is we're hoping that through mechanisms like this, we can help to communicate to the House of Commons the importance of moving more quickly. But make no mistake, this is not going to be an easy call. In that we know that look at the other parties. They're not supporting it at this point. So if we've got support in the NDP and the Green Party at this point, that I believe adds up to a total of 28 out of 338 votes in support if it were to get to that point. So I appreciate the question, because it also, to me, speaks to, let's be clear about expectations. We are, we're not in the same place as we are with the Canada Disability Benefit, where the governing party committed to a particular action, and we've been pushing and pushing for them to follow through on that commitment. Much different place than when it comes to DERB, where we need to have them even buy into even talking about the idea, and now we're seeing a minister who is making clear that they aren't currently supportive with the words that were in the Globe. So we're starting from a different starting point, but that's why advocacy matters. That's why I really respect you both and those who are watching this afternoon, because we know that when we see government providing an inadequate response, as is the case here, that we need to raise our voices and attempt to advocate in the numbers required to shift their policy.
There was a recent article that was actually in the Globe and Mail that about the slow rollout of the Canada Disability Benefit. I thought it was quite amusing that they made the headlines, right there,
And one of the really negative, other negative comments we got is somebody said, well, Mike's 1,000 days too late. I mean, kind of what's the point? And it's like, that doesn't really, I mean, I kind of understand the frustration and I understand the anger, but, just to, blame Mike or blame Benita or Peter Julian or whatever, it doesn't really solve anything. And before we went live, I was telling you, that's one of my pet peeves about the whole thing is when you see so much like infighting and division within the disability community. That's not right. Like that doesn't solve anything, right? And it's just so frustrating.
Well, again, that's why, I mean, the federal government's just dragging their heels, badly dragging their heels. What is it now, 1,062 days now since they first promised the CDB, and they don't seem to have any appetite of getting that going anytime soon. I mean, a very weak framework, and I mean, kudos, definitely to you, Mike, for getting all these other amendments that they're in place, and that's awesome. I mean, so happy that you got all these amendments and everybody that's had their input of getting all the amendments put in place for the.
You're adding ingredients into the pot of spaghetti, right? And that's
into my pot of spaghetti. I keep talking about the famous pot. And it's awesome that that you're doing all this work, and MP Zarrillo and there's so many more that are all working on the piece of the pie, should we say, or the pot of spaghetti, right? As I always talk about, and it's so important to having everybody's input in it, and where you have testimonial statements where in the committee, and it's so unfortunate that the policy makers, the ones who are in there, they kind of like this kind of, it almost seemed like they kind of, you don't need to speak right now, right? They just have their agenda of rushing and kind of squashing this down, of watering it down so that we can just take our time in getting this done. Well, people's lives, as you say, I mean, they don't get put on hold. Advocacy doesn't get
there's two sides to it, right? There's two sides to it. Like, you want it to be done right. You don't want it to be done haphazardly. So that's one part of it. But at the same time, too, I mean, when they rolled out CERB, remember the Prime Minister said, well, let's just figure it out later,
Yeah,
right?
figure it out later,
and,
yeah.
and you kind of have to I think you kind of have to do that now with DERB. I mean, that's
Yeah.
why these petitions are so important. Just put something out there. And yeah, I think it's important that we really fine tune the actual CDB when it comes out. But for now, like the emergency part of it can just be like, just rush it out there and get something out there.
Well,
and then worry about the finer points later, right?
Yeah, well, that's why it's an emergency, because it's like when there's a crisis, what do? Well, we'll think about it later. Like, I mean, look what's going on.
When your house is on fire, you get out of the house, right? You don't
look at what's
going
on in British Columbia. Is the worst in BC's history, and there's a crisis. So they're all the first responders are out there, and I want to quickly just take 10 seconds of our segment. I want to thank the first responders, the fire department, all the first responders, I'll call them, all of the above. Thank you for doing everything that you're doing and helping British Columbia through this crisis situation that I just can't. I'm just lost for words, because it's heartbreaking to hear all the stories that people have gone through and what they're going through and all the losses going forward. Immensely, but thank you so much to all that are doing what they can do to help people through this crisis situation.
Well, Brent, what you make me think of when you share that, and appreciate those kind words for the first responders, is what this is really about. It's actually very similar to the climate crisis. This is about moving past pretty words and moving towards action at the pace that this emergency actually requires. And that's what we're not seeing in the House of Commons on either one of these fronts, whether it's climate-fueled wildfires, that this is not a surprise. This is a lack of political will from different political parties at all levels of government for many decades. And it's just as true when it comes to people with disabilities living in poverty right now. That you're getting a lot of pretty words, but the fact is, if you actually wanted to go faster, you absolutely could. So this is a choice that's being made, and that is as a result of a lack of political will from elected people in this country, who I happen to think, we could elect people in a way that's more proportional, as opposed to the current way we elect people under first past the post. That's a whole separate aside for, I think, one reason why we see delayed action. But we need to push to see more urgency from MPs right across the country. And I think that's, again, why I turn to, what you shared earlier, Neil, and some of the frustration you're hearing. I get it. Or at least I can appreciate it. I don't have the same lived experience, so maybe I'll never fully understand it, but I can appreciate for people living in legislative poverty year over year with broken promises from different political leaders over so long that someone's in a position where they're going to lash out. And if that is to me or to anybody else, I don't hold it against them. What really angers me, though, is when we see that there are solutions available and pretty words getting used about them, but not the action to back it up.
The part that really frustrates the part that really frustrates me. Sorry, Mike. The part that really frustrates me is when I think back at the beginning of the pandemic, where I used to call it the Trudeau show. Sonia used to laugh about. She goes, "Oh, the Trudeau show is on." And, wake up and watch TV. Come in on the TV. Justin Trudeau would come out of the cottage, right? He'd open the door, come out there, and the media would be on them. And so I'd be waiting day after day. Announcement. Well, maybe there'd be something for Canadians with disabilities. No, we're going to talk about seniors. We're going to talk about the workers' benefit. We're going to talk about, but nope, nothing to do with Canadians with disabilities. Finally, like, you can see the narrative slowly getting there, but at the very end. But we got your back. We hear you. We're with you. And all these pretty words, like, and I'm thinking, okay, then the launch of, we're going to do a Canada Disability Benefit. And then they pull the plug, call an election. just what was it, one day when they brought it out on the House of Commons, the first reading, and then poof, gone. Was it Bill C-35, and then it got relaunched again as Bill C-22. So many people I know back then, a building that I was living in, they were saying, oh, they're going to come out and actually help us. The federal government actually cares. They're actually going to help us now. Like, well, we'll see. We'll see. And I always kept my eye on that. And that's when I realized, and I approached Neil, and the story is, and I said, Neil, we got to do something. I got to do something for the disability community. I got to bring people together, because I see what's happening here. I see something not so good. And and that's where we are now.
Well, the best of Brent that I just put out. I don't know if you saw it, Mike, but I did a best of Brent, and I included the song. Remember I did the song "Honesty," Billy Joel, and one of the lyrics in the song is, "I don't need no pretty face to tell me pretty lies. I just want someone that I can count on," or something like that. And it's so true. Like, that's what we want from our politicians, right? We don't want pretty lies.
We don't want all talk but no action. Is basically it.
And anyway, that's why I include that. Yeah. Include that in there.
I like that, actually, and did a good job on that, by the way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're at. And people are just they're really desperate for help, and there should be help. Like, there shouldn't even be an excuse. It's all policy driven. It doesn't affect, I guess the way I look at it is, it doesn't affect the policymakers, their lives. So there's no urgency, but it put themselves into the shoes of a person with disabilities in Canada and around the world, but in Canada anyway, and live their lives, just even for like one day, a month, a year. Man, I tell you, their eyes would open. I mean, I know the other night I got really criticized because well, what are you having for dinner? I saw you, well, you hadn't pulled anything out, and I threw popcorn. I wasn't really that hungry. This is what's for dinner, and it just blew up, boom. Like, yeah.
Well, one of the comments we got from Tom too is, remember he told us that we should be doing another segment called Disability 101 or something. Remember? And one of the first ones that I would want to do is, because I think there's that prevailing attitude from people that aren't disabled that, oh, well, your life sucks anyway. People with disabilities, your life sucks anyway. Well, I'll tell you, my life doesn't suck. I like my life, right? Like, yeah. I really, really like my life. I love that I'm here, and all I want is for, policymakers to make policy that makes sense and that is honest and true and based on reality. And that's why, I'm big on the clawbacks, right? I talk about clawbacks being the pink unicorn, because it's like you're turning something that's supposed to be a protected income, and you're saying, poof, it's no longer a protected income. We're changing the goalposts. The goalposts are now way over here. And, that they have this idea that, if you're an able-bodied person, then you have these standards here. And then if you're a disabled person or elderly, your standards are over here. And, it shouldn't be the case. Like, true is true and reality is reality. And it should be that for everyone, right? Well, because otherwise, then what's the point?
Well, that's why it's so important to, to have a unified, program in place, like emergency amount, immediate emergency amount. And I don't know how much more we can stress to the federal government to understand that this is an emergency. This is not just it would be nice to have. No, it's an emergency. Like, people's lives are at risk here, and
people are actually dying.
People are dying.
Or choosing MAID, and I mean, that's terrible.
It is. I mean, they should not be having to choose MAID because of income inequality, of government neglect, of legislative poverty. And when I mentioned just a few minutes ago, when I mentioned popcorn for dinner, well, we have the money budgeted, and we have like a 5-week month. When you get those 5-week months, it makes it very difficult. And so I looked in the future, well, what am I going to pull out? I mean, I got to make that last till, X amount of days. And, I had a late lunch. So I really, like, wasn't that hungry, so I just had popcorn for dinner, and of course right away, well, I had a comment, well, you and Sonia get $125 each. That's besides the point. The point is that when you go to the store, your buying power is not there. So you can go and buy laundry soap, you can go and buy this and that. Next thing you know, poof again.
We've got a comment from Beach, and he says, "Hi, is Mike going to be able to talk, or because he's only going to be on for so long?" So I apologize, Mike. It's true. We're probably taking up all your time. So,
well, no, I think it's really important to be hearing both of your perspectives with lived experience. I appreciate what you said, Neil, about how much you enjoy your life, and Brent, helping people understand what it's like. A lot of people wouldn't know what it's like to think about a budget, and that some months are longer than others, and you're thinking meal by meal. I think one thing I wanted to add is, in addition to the call for the Disability Emergency Response Benefit, how important it is that we also continue other really important pieces of advocacy. Some folks might be aware the Government of Canada released the process for the regulations of the Canada Disability Benefit this summer. I'm sure, Neil, you've probably got the link to it. I'll put it in the chat here to share it on the YouTube channel also, if not. And that's what's going to set out the process.
Maybe what you could do, maybe what you could do, Mike, is just actually send it to my DM on my Twitter, and I'll add it.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Because one of the other amendments that we were successful, so there was 9 amendments to the bill that is now the Disability Act, that is now law, or at least it has royal assent, and it's going to get into law over time. 5 of the 9, one of those 5 that we were successful with, requires people with disabilities to be meaningfully involved in the creation of the Canada Disability Benefit and barrier-free. Well, if you look at what they've posted for an engagement process, I'm a little bit skeptical that this matches what we had them add to the bill. This is saying there's going to be an information session, there's some roundtables, an online survey. That doesn't quite match what we'd previously understood. So some organizations are going to an information session tomorrow, I'm told. I'm going to be debriefing with some of those organizations. What we'd called for, and what's in the bill, is that people with disabilities across the country would be at that table. Again, pretty words, nothing about us without us. Well, we need to now hold them accountable to what was in C22. Because we also know that almost every important decision about the Canada Disability Benefit is left to the regulations, which is outside of Parliament now. Things like who's eligible and how much is it going to be, pretty important questions, are all in the regulations. Well, we need to make sure that you both and other people with disabilities across the country are at that table, pushing them to ensure it's the best possible benefit. So I think it'd be fantastic, Neil, if you could share that link so people can see what's been announced. And I think over the coming weeks, we're going to see more from organizations like Disability Without Poverty and March of Dimes and others, and Inclusion Canada, who've been advocating alongside people with disabilities to see, well, maybe we need to be pushing them more to meet the expectation that was set in the bill itself.
And you make a great point, Mike, because I'm thinking about back here in BC that there was some accessibility legislation. Remember that, Brent, where they had the Shane Simpson came out and he did those roundtables, and they were good. They were good. I'm glad I went to those. But the problem with them is that they gave out this package with like pre-packaged with questions and everything, and so it already kind of filtered out what we're supposed to be talking about, right? So it wasn't like, come to this thing and just have open discussion. It was like, we're going to stick to the package. We're going to stick to exactly what's in the package, and anything that's off book, we're not going to cover, right? So it was like, there was no discussion about clawbacks and how perverse that is. It was all like, let's just talk about building more ramps and building accessible playgrounds and stuff like that, right? It was, so you make a great
it's all
point,
about
Mike.
it's all about inclusion, right? It's all about including the disability community across Canada to come together in developing this disability Canada disability benefit, and having some of the voices not being heard. It's really hurtful. It's really hurtful.
Well, I'll include the text to Neil again, and we can share it over DM if you'd like to share with the community. The language we got in there is that they're meaningful and barrier-free opportunities to collaborate in the development and design of the regulations, including eligibility criteria, application process. So collaboration is more than just you giving me an online survey that I fill out by a certain date and who knows what you do with it. That sounds like a very one-way street type of an approach, right? Yeah. So I think it's important we consider advocacy around the regulatory process. The other one is the budget.
Yeah.
Right. That we need to continue. Like when it came to childcare, and when the governing party was really serious about childcare, they allocated money first. They budgeted for it. Then they got into negotiations with provinces and territories. And then last, they set it out and enshrined it in legislation to make it more difficult for other parties to change it. Well, here, it's the opposite. They did the legislation first and said, oh, we can't do more until we then move into negotiations, and then we'll allocate budget. Well, that's not always the case, actually. And you'd think you'd be in a stronger position if you've already allocated budget for it and said, hey, we're at the table. We know this is a significant investment. This is where the federal government is going to be. The only budget allocation for the disability benefit so far has been to the public service to design it. There's no dollars actually allocated to the benefit yet. So we had been and will continue to call that in the next budget or in the fall economic statement, they could begin to allocate funds for the disability benefit. They haven't yet. If this is about trust and building trust with the disability community, what better way to do that than to say, okay, you know what, we recognize this is an emergency. So here's an emergency response, and here's the allocation to ensure that we're ready for when the disability benefit rolls out. I don't think it needs to be one or the other. Yeah, they can do both. And to your points, if they really saw this, if they saw legislated poverty in the disability community as an emergency, there's a direct call to action that they can follow through. Maybe part of the issue is maybe we have normalized poverty in this country. And Brent, you mentioned earlier, how is it going to affect their lives? Well, it should affect every MP's life, because they should be hearing from hundreds of people in their community up in arms over legislated poverty for people with disabilities, which kind of goes back to all the importance of this conversation that you both host on a regular basis. All of the advocacy from the disability community is you're helping make clear to MPs that this is politically important for them. They need to know that.
It is. It's extremely important that there's like 1.5 million disabled Canadians who are on government programs in legislative poverty. Now, here's a reminder to the federal politicians, policymakers. Now, their families, their caregivers, their doctors, the nurses, first responders of it's all interconnected. How many voters are there in Canada now? So, and I'm not going to put this as a partisan issue, as nonpartisan, but really, how many people will it affect if you don't make these proper decisions? How it affects people's lives? They're interconnected. Maybe they know people, other family members that are extended, and it hurts their family knowing that their cousins or their grandparents are disabled. It's a ripple effect, and it hurts everybody across the nation.
I mean, how many decades was there unpaid labor for housewives, right? Right. I mean, it was just kind of understood. Of course, housewives are going to stay home, but I mean, that's a lot of work And
Yes.
you think about, you're talking about care aids for people with disabilities or people that are elderly. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a lot of families that are taking care of the people that are elderly or people with disabilities. And in those cases, people are having to step away from their jobs so that they can take care of these. So it is a trickle down effect. You're right, Brent.
It is, and I mean, a disability can happen to anybody at any time. It doesn't matter who they are. I mean, and it will, it will happen. It's not being a candidate. It will happen. Born or develop it. You can get in an accident. I mean, you name it. When I was I guess I was about 11. I was almost 12 years old. One of my neighbors played hockey and had a hockey accident and became paraplegic, just like that. Just like that. I remember now, I still remember ambulance, there was two ambulances, they were all racing down the road. Well, of course, me, busybody, well, what's going on? What's going on? I hear all the sirens. They went down there and he had an accident. His father had built a little ice rink and it was in the wintertime in his backyard. He went like this and they had all the kids together and had an accident and that was it. So, I mean, it can happen to anybody at any time. I really don't want anyone to take life for granted. Never take life for granted because things can change so fast.
We have about 7 minutes left before at the top of the hour. So
place is great. So I want to extend how important it is to get an emergency fund out to help Canadians with disabilities. We can get the Canada Disability Benefit funding going too. That can be done at the same time. And you're 100%. I mean, you're beyond 100% right on that, Mike. It can be done both at the same time. It's all about excuses, from the federal government. Excuses, delay tactics. I used to use the old phrase, "kick the can down the road." Well, delay. Well, we'll do it later. Well, there's more to do. There's always that key word, more to do. To me, that's like a delay tactic. It's they know it needs to be done now when it affects people's lives. So I want to say thank you right now before we go into our ending comments. And to Mike, I want to thank you very much for coming on today and talking about DERB and how important it is to get the funds out immediate to people and the Canada Disability Benefit, all the amendments that you managed to get passed through, 5 out of the 9. That's amazing. And of course now we know what's happening with that. And we'll do a follow-up. I'll have you back on again in the very, very, very near future here. And we'll, as disability never takes a break, the advocacy never takes a break.
I'll try not to have the technical problems.
Oh, well, and if I, we're fine. It happens every now and then. If I get a chance for a few concluding offers, I guess, first of all, these conversations have been so important to me since pretty much I was elected. We'd reached out and had our first one over that other social media platform. And for me, this has been such a great way to stay closely connected to the disability community. So I really appreciate you both for this. To me is a really important for our democracy. As an elected person, I want to be informed by your experiences. I also want to be answering the questions and accountable to the disability community. So I appreciate you both for providing these, and I'll continue to be joining for them at whatever regularity you think people want to hear from me to make sure that we continue to have that two-way flow. For those who want to continue to advocate, I know some have said, okay, I signed the petition already. What else can I do? Well, of course, you can share the petition. The more signatures, the more we'll be able to articulate the extent to which this is important for so many people across the country. But in addition to the petition, you can also reach out to your MP directly. You could email that person, their email address. I can just tell you, it's their first name, a period, their last name, the @ PARL.GC as in Government of Canada.ca. And in that email, you could explain your lived experience. You could share the action you want them to take, for example, to introduce a disability emergency response benefit. You can ask them for a conversation to actually meet with them about it. And then you can even go so far as to say, what will you do to help advocate for this? What are you doing with the influence you have as my member of parliament to move this ahead. Not that there's a vote on it tomorrow, but you could be taking steps to help bring this to fruition. Have you met with the minister? Have you written the minister a letter, for example? So please don't be, if you're looking for more ways to be engaged, advocating directly to your MP, having those in your community doing the same. This is how we continue putting that pressure on. We were talking about that story you were sharing, Brent, in the Globe and Mail. That story didn't just fall out of the sky. My sense is that Jeffrey reached out to the Globe and said, I want to talk with you about my petition. And so look at what that, as one person, what their advocacy has led to in terms of now, getting a question to the minister about it, getting it in a national publication. That's putting more and more pressure. These are the things that we can each be considering to the extent we have the energy and, the weight of legislative poverty is its own. So not that there's an expectation, but for those listening, if people are looking for more ways and say, okay, I've signed your petition and I want to do more, those are some things to consider. I wanted to also offer that I know Disability Without Poverty is offering a session talking about the regulatory process that I mentioned earlier. And so if folks are interested, it's September 12th at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern time. And if you follow Disability Without Poverty on Instagram or Canadian Down Syndrome Society, a number of organizations are sharing about that. It's another way to stay connected to that process in addition to what Neil's going to send out for those that are interested in engaging in that regulatory process and in that continued pressure to get the Canada Disability benefit in the budget. So a few more ideas for people to consider as you might want to continue your advocacy, as well as the 2 petitions we do have out there, which are part of what will be a pretty big jump for us to try to shift where the federal government is at on this. We've got a long way to go, but look at what we did. If you look back to, Brent, you mentioned when C-35 got introduced just before an election, and it was the disability community that was able to put the pressure on to get C-22 reintroduced, to get all-party support for it, to get it through the House and through the Senate. It's not nearly enough, but the wins we've earned to date are your wins. You did it. The disability community across the country kept the pressure on to get that follow through. And that is, to me, what our democracy should be about. So a long way of saying, I guess, thanks to you both for hosting this again. Thanks for having me back again. And thanks to those who've joined us live for the questions you have shared. For those maybe who are watching a recording, feel free to be in touch with Neil and Brent. I'll be back here. It sounds like other MPs will be back here also. And I know your advocacy is not going to let up, whether it's on social media or in meetings with MPs. We really need it. And I just really appreciate you both. So thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I want to thank you very much, Mike. So just anyone watching for new links that are coming up with my upcoming guests, MPs, MLAs, whoever it may be. If it's the Twitter, I still call it Twitter. Elon Musk calls it the X. I always call it Twitter because that's what it is. Just stay tuned. And Mike, I want to thank you very much for coming on today. It's always a pleasure having you on, and look forward to having you on again soon. Anyone tuning in today and on the podcast listening after, stay tuned for any upcoming segments for my guest coming up. If you want to be a guest, reach out to Neil, daddybentlegs.com, right? And there's a tab over there. Scroll over onto the page, request that you'd like to come on, you have ideas for the show, let us know. Or if you know somebody else who wants to come on, feel free, reach out to me, Weatherman on Twitter, reach out to Neil Matheson, 1 on Twitter. You can direct message us, send us a actual Twitter message, however you feel you want to do it. Be a guest and be part of the solution here of making a better Canada for everybody. So I want to thank everybody to tuning in today. It's been a great pleasure having Mike join us today, and for everybody tuning in. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.